based on the presentations we had. Any questions, please?
Where's it down?
Yes, Brother Alkum. You had a question for whom?
From Pastor Suarez? He's coming.
Yes.
Tocante al consumo de chocolate,
According to chocolate consume
picantes,
and spicy food
el bicarbonato de sodio.
and sodium.
Hay una fuerte promoción en varias instituciones de salud
There is a promotion in many institutions of health
que lo promueven como saludables.
that they promote it like as healthy food.
Yo quiero saber si, cuál es la recomendación
What is the recommendation?
del Departamento de Salud, en este
The
caso,
health department in this case,
específicamente del Pastor Suárez,
specifically from Brother
sobre
Suarez,
estos productos.
for these products.
The question is very pertinent. The brother asked about chocolate and about spices and about sodium bicarbonate. Brother Pablo has been talking about worldwide resolutions. We have contradictory resolutions on chocolate. Please translate that. We have contradictory resolutions on chocolate at the World Assembly. Originally, our stand was that we are against chocolate, which I believe is the correct position. Then that was modified in 1989, where a past medical director stood up and said that the problem with chocolate was the sugar. And that is not true. Chocolate has a drug. It's a very mild drug. It's a stimulant. It's called theobromine. Both Dr. Hugo Lopez and myself have published articles that theobromine is found in chocolate. Now, chocolate also contains caffeine, naturally. Contains caffeine. There's new problems with chocolate, and that is that in the production of chocolate, slave labor is used. And many Europeans have been showing evidence that children taken as slaves have been used in picking up the pods in Africa to produce chocolate. So as a church, we do not discipline anyone that uses chocolate. If you go to Europe, you're going to see they use it very much. But those that are exposed to the evidence come to the decision that chocolate contains caffeine, and caffeine is a stimulant. It contains theobromine, which means literally the food of the gods. Chocolate comes from the Mayas and from the Aztecs. It was used in their ceremonies to worship the gods. And it is harmful. That does not mean that chocolate can have some good properties. I mean, meat even has good properties, and so does milk, and so does even alcohol. It has calories. But when you look at the nutrient density, when you look at the amount of stimulants that it contains and the amount of nutrients, I personally classify it as an unnecessary food, especially when we have a very good substitute, which is St. John's bread, which is carob. Carob that is very healthy, that has a biblical tradition. Now, regarding spices, this is another big problem. If you go to the West Indies, they use a lot of spices. In Jamaica and Trinidad. If you go to India, it's worse. They have entire counters full of spices. And we can't consider all spices the same. We use garlic in Latin America, that is a spice and a condiment, and it is a healthy spice. But there are spices that are not healthy for us. And what we look at in food science is the amount of heat it produces in the mouth. And there are generations. Mexico, we can go to Mexico, they have very strong spices. They're jalapenos. These jalapenos have a lot of vitamin A, but they have a very hot spice that burns the mouth, especially if you're not used to it. Sister White in Ministry of Healing says we should avoid spices. But as a matter of fact, when we look at the generations of people that have taken this, if they don't eat those spices, they get sick. That's proof that it's a stimulant. Because if I stop eating mangoes, I will not get sick. If I stop eating dates that I eat every day, I will not get sick. But when people stop eating a certain food and they get sick, that proves it is something to think about, that is a stimulating food. And many of our people eat spices, I'm sorry. I have to admit that. I've traveled all over the world, and I see that, and I try to educate, but we need to be very patient with them. You go to Bolivia, they have locoto, these very strong spices. That does not mean that in a given moment, people can use spices as medicine, like you use a drug as medicine, like you use antibiotics. The same, they're in the same level. They are drugs. They contain stimulants. But in terms of our daily diet, spices are not. These hot spices, these hot condiments, are not natural. They are not healthy. I'll give you a specific example. These spices from Mexico that I've studied, they contain a neurotoxin called capsicum. Capsaicin is the name, capsaicin. The generic name is capsicum, but it's capsaicin. And this capsaicin is a neurotoxin. It destroys the neurons in the stomach and in the intestines. It is a stimulant, and it is considered such in pharmacology. So if you can identify a stimulant in a food, and if you can prove that that stimulant remains in that food, and it is not eliminated in processing, then we should think twice about it. For example, yuca, cassava, has cyanide naturally. Cianuro, naturally. But when you cook it, the cyanide evaporates. It's totally gone. There is no cyanide left. And the Indians knew this. And the white people that came from Europe learned the habits from the Indians in using cassava. So I say that if you can prove that there is a stimulant, but that stimulant is eliminated during the processing, then it becomes a healthy food. Now the other group that you mentioned is bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is used sometimes in bread in lieu of yeast, and we need to look at the medical condition of the person. If someone is suffering from candidiasis, that they can't have yeast, I would recommend using bicarbonate because they would like to have bread, and that is a substitute. If someone is having acid indigestion, you can have bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is a natural product of the body. Our pancreas produces bicarbonate. The problem is that it is added in processing, in food processing. We add so many things to our food that is not healthy. And Sister White speaks specifically against bicarbonate. And she speaks about spices. Some of them she mentions by name, many of them she doesn't mention by name because she didn't know them. But we know them today. So this is an area that we need to grow, and we need to educate, and we need to provide substitutes for our people and to be patient with them. Yes, thank you for your questions. They're very appropriate.
I have a question
Yes.
about
white rice
Yes.
and lot of variety because we have in Haiti we got the light rice, we got white sweet potato, we got the white yam, and we got a lot of other things, but I heard one doctor said, do not use the white flavor and like a white bread, but we don't use it at all. But what do you think about exactly the right rice? But a lot of people, isn't a farmer, use it.
Yes. Thank you. Let me tell you, I grew up eating white rice and black beans. And that's why we classified it in the yellow. That there is a place for it. Brown rice is healthier. There's no doubt. You have wild rice also. It is very healthy. But we cannot make a policy, you cannot have white rice. Because I don't find that in the Testament. We should avoid refined foods. Now you talked about tubers that are white. White yams, those are okay, that's their natural color. We're not against that. Yeah, white beans, that's fine. That's their natural color, and you know, their sesame seeds, for example. We have white sesame seeds here. I've been in other countries where they have black sesame seeds. That's their natural color. If there's a natural color, is okay. But people who consume a lot of white rice in every single meal, like many places in the Orient, it will catch up with you. It does lead to constipation. Yes. Now, what they've done with white rice, we need to say, is sometimes they add on the nutrients back in. So it's not so harmful. And they've added the nutrients back that they've removed. Yes. You have a comment.
Brother Del, I would like to explain that it is 40 years ago, they don't call it white rice. They call it unpolished rice. It is not the color of the rice, but it is because in the Philippines, you put it in the wood, you heat it, and it's become a brand. There is the wheat germ. And people always talk against white rice, white rice. According to the scientists, the reason why Africa and Asia survived for more than 5,000 years is because of eating white rice. Because 90% of the white rice is water. And when you live in a torrid zone, hot weather, you need water, and the rice saves them.
Yeah. You know, white rice naturally has B1 vitamin. Okay, it's called thiamine. And I believe it was in Indonesia or the Philippines that they noticed that they were polishing the rice.
And then the people become
And they became sick, yes.
with the bones.
And they were giving that rice to the chickens, and the chickens were healthy. Then they looked at the chickens, and they started to give them the same polished white rice.
Indeed.
And then they got sick too. And that's how thiamine was discovered. You have to keep in mind that our diet is composed of many foods. And I know that white rice is very close to the heart of many of my Asian brethren, and it's part of their cuisine, it is part of their culture.
And
I'm not saying that it is a sin.
Now.
Listen to me. I'm not saying it's a sin to consume it. I consume white rice too when I go to those countries. But brown rice is healthier, and it is available. And wild rice is another alternative. And if we consume it 3 times a day throughout our generations, it will catch up with us, with diabetes and with other maladies. And you will see that in the people that have consumed it over the years. But what you're saying about polish is true. Thank you.
Any other questions, Brother Petko?
It's more than a statement than a question. It's related to the decisions of the General Conference. And it's very careful, it's very important that we apply the decisions as they are taken. the decisions for General Conference are not decisions for unions and fields. The decisions about 8 years and 10 years of office is not a decision that the union or field cannot have their officers in 2 terms. I had a phone call this last week from South America. The treasurer of a big union have been changed using this principle. And they say you cannot be treasurer more than 2 times because decision of General Conference says that. So then the brother asked me for the ministerial department, where is this decision, brother, that we cannot have our treasurer more than 2 terms? I was feeling very uncomfortable. I must tell you, I have to tell them, brother, there is no such a decision. I tried to avoid the questions and this and that. And finally, I showed him this decision, 8 and 10 years. This is say, but brother, this is not about the unions and field. And he used words that are not nice for the General Conference officers that serve the union. He says we were deceived. I mean, this is an ethical question that if it's needed to remove an officer because of certain reasons, you know, you use the reasons that is needed to be removed. But using this decision for that reason, it is kind of tricky. In another case, also delegates approach me and say, brother, we discover in the booklet that is nothing about 2 terms and nothing about unions and fields. I feel very uncomfortable to answer and to defend the General Conference in this case. This is just a comment and recommendation because we are here leaders and pastors and you're reorganizing your fields all the time. Be very careful with applying your personal interpretation of the decisions as it will be decisions of the delegate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I mentioned that I want to emphasize in 2 points related with that. There is another resolution that it mentioned 2 periods. But this was more, as I mentioned also for this resolution, was applied for the General Conference. There is also a principle in the church manual that emphasizes that many points that have been applied for the General Conference apply for all the levels. And that's why I mentioned when you specify this, that we have been applying, that's why this is a moment to discuss those issues, because in resolution there have been gaps, and different brothers apply differently. And I respect the position from one and for the other because their argumentation from one and for the other. But that's why I clarify the issue that had been applied 2 periods in different levels, not only to the General Conference, based, as I mentioned, the church manual that mentioned that issues apply in different levels of the organization, as well as this 2 period is mentioned also in another resolution, not the one that I read. And I want also to mention on what Brother Gowie mentioned. This is as much as possible is mentioned as a recommendation, because also testimonies speak. And this is not just a resolution, administrative, but it's also a divine inspiration of the importance of changes in the responsibilities. I know that with treasury issue, it had not been recommended so often to change because of it's not just a spiritual point, but it had to do with the technical issue. And it had been not so applied as much as other responsibility, the resolution. In my case, and as much as I have seen in other ministers related with the resolution. But I try to explain how I understand also the resolution and how we have been applying the resolution in the different level of the organization. If we have problem with the understanding, it's important to clarify, to present the issues to the higher level for clarification. But as I mentioned, there are several resolutions applied differently depending on understanding from the brethren. And there are some gaps in the resolution. This is also important element to consider. But I understand the comment of the brother, and it's an issue that it had been also given options for comments or questioning the rest of the application.
You can present that as a proposal for the next general conference, let's be that well formulated. Otherwise, it doesn't look good. There is no testimony that speaks about 2 terms, and there is not resolution in the church manual talking about it. So we need to be careful. The trust in the organization, it's put in question if we do not keep certain...
There is a resolution that mentioned 2 terms, but it was related with the General Conference. Yeah, but it's mentioned 2 terms. That's why it may specify, because it had to do also with the period that had been discussed not only one occasion, is 8 to 10 years, because of the 2 terms in the World Assembly. And there is also testimony, as I mentioned, is not mentioned the years, but it mentioned the need of changing the responsibilities. When I apply on this, I think was based on resolutions.
Okay, I think Brother Govi, next.
I have 3 questions.
Make it
One
short,
for
brother,
Brother
because we have
Larry.
only 6 minutes more.
Okay, Brother Larry, quickly. I want you to explain to us the man inspired the word different from the word being inspired. Explain more on that.
It's very simple, Brother Govi. God did not tell the, or he didn't state exactly what word to use in every case. Now, there are some times when there are quotes, that actually God said such and so. Those words are taken as being literal. But the Bible says from precept to precept, a line upon line. The ideas, the writer was inspired, not the words were inspired. So he used the words, the best words he knew how to use. Okay? Does that explain it?
Yes,
Somebody
sir.
like to help?
Because what happened, even with Sister White writings, there people believe they're verbatim. Like God said, Sister White, you write this, and she write exactly what God said.
There are times when the angel spoke and she quoted. That's a different situation. Brother Joe.
Brother Larry, is that not by the letter of the law, but by the spirit of the law?
That's very close to the right attitude.
How about if I ask you a question? If they remove all the Bible around the world, how can we be guided? Through the Spirit? Or if you burn everything and then, like the Waldens have written it in the cave, like if we destroy everything, how can we be saved by the Word? I mean to say.
God has not allowed that, so we have the Bible.
I'm just
What
asking.
God has allowed, He has allowed. He's given us the Word, and we need to go by the Word. We need to understand, just like we were looking at Paul and James, they used the same experience, and they used that experience to prove 2 different things. So we have to understand that the man was the one inspired, not the exact words always. Now the words are very important. We should look to the meaning of how they were used. But you can use the same word or different words that mean the same thing.
Oh.
Okay?
So it's not the singer, but it is the song.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Simon.
I would like to know something about the review of manual, the church manual, because at a big church, I've been so long, and then they review the manual, the church manual every 5 years. Every 5 years they got an election for the general conference, and they review the manual. The manual, sometimes they added something or they minus something else. But I don't know nothing about the reform church manual. If they added something, and then if they got it for eternity without no other no minus.
Okay.
Okay, brother. It had been countries that had asked me which manual is the one that we need to use. When I have mentioned them, brother, the resolution since when are applicable after the resolution is taken. That means that we have a church manual, but there are changes on the church manual. And it's important for us as minister and worker to know those changes, because if the change is done, we cannot say that the change is not done yet in the manual. That's why you can still keep doing the same mistakes. No, we cannot do that. I need to clarify, it is under work in the moment in the new edition of the church manual. Had been work of the publishing department as well as the ministerial department. They are working in the new edition of the church manual. But this takes time. It is important to consider this, that church manual is guideline for our work, but we need to consider the resolution, update the information with the resolution.
I think Brother Oscar is next.
I had a person call me last week and he didn't ask. He says that he has studied the scriptures and he studied the Spirit Prophecy and cannot find anywhere such a thing as a nominating committee. They should be the delegates who make the decision in who's to be in office. That's what I want to know.
We will deal with that in the next days, but I can, because we go to the church manual, but I can mention there are several issues that they have is part of the organization of the system, how the church works. When I had find very helpful the work with the nomination committee. Recently, I was in an organization, we worked with the nominating committee, then we came back with the nominating committee, and the brethren they did not want to accept the recommendation of the nominating committee, and they wanted to modify it publicly. And I told them, brethren, why do we have a nomination committee? It's mentioned in the church manual. It's in order to ethically work openly in the nominating committee, discuss the person, the positive and the negative, the limitation of every candidate, that if we discuss openly in the open delegation will not be helpful for the spirituality of everyone. That it had his reason why it was mentioned. We can also use testimonies for that work too. The importance of try to work in a close circles when we deal with delicate issues. And I think that is the reason behind the practice of the nominating committee, when it's part of our system.
So thank you very much. I think we have passed time, and I think we gave everyone of
I did have
an opportunity. You had the opportunity, and you asked the question, but we have to stick to the time.
Yeah, okay.
So thank you very much for your participation. I think we can go for a prayer, and we can conclude this meeting. And I would like to ask Sister Veronica, would you mind leading us in prayer?